Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Talent Gap Fireside Chat, where we talk about causes of and solutions to the talent gap. I'm your host, Pete Strauss, and joining me today is Jordan Scher. He is Vice President of Marketing at LastPass. Welcome, Jordan.
Pete, it's great to be here.
Well, thanks for being here. Could you give our audience a little background on you and your career thus far?
Yeah, for sure. So 15 years experience in SaaS marketing with a specific expertise in IT operations, cybersecurity, data centers. I have run corporate marketing teams at a variety of different size companies over that time, everywhere from startups all the way to scale-ups, companies that have been acquired by private equity, and a wide variety of different team makeups, and done a lot of team building in that time.
Very cool. Yeah. So obviously the focus of the show is hiring in the security field specifically. Yep. And if there's any talent gap out there, what about on the marketing side? Do you think there's any sort of talent gap when it comes to, security marketing talent?
Yeah. I mean, is it cliche nowadays to talk about hiring in the AI, in the world of AI now? So the industry is changing rapidly with all the tools available to it. And I think that there's a huge talent gap in terms of what actions to take, how to use some of these tools, how to build an AI strategy for marketing that's meaningful, because AI, I think, is particularly disruptive in the marketing world. So how do we prepare for it? I think the most interesting opportunities that I have seen are people who are educated in the discipline of using AI for marketing, go-to-market engineers, and how to make the best use of tools. Because it's not exactly like we're going to replace our marketing team with an AI tool because we can. It's how do we fold AI more meaningfully into existing marketing teams so there's always a human in the loop and you're not just degenerating into an AI slot machine. I think that's a default activity for a lot of small marketing teams. Like, can we just use AI to do things? But it has to be folded in more meaningfully. So that's one piece of it. The second piece is that looking for folks in marketing who not only have a specific understanding of the product that we sell, but marketing in cybersecurity is very unique and different in and of itself. So if you can understand the personalities, the culture, the dialogue that goes on in cybersecurity in terms of marketing, for a corporate marketing team like mine, that's gold. How do you understand that kind of makeup and that personality?
How would you evaluate somebody's knowledge in those areas beyond they've just done this same job before at another security company? Like, do you think that's the most efficient way to evaluate that kind of ability, or is there another way to it?
Yeah, the most interesting, so cybersecurity, from a personality perspective, it is a world filled with like fighter pilots and trauma surgeons and people who are fixers and who want to go in and see issues, critically and want to fix them. And so if you can in the interview process, like, understand that, ask someone, how would you fix what's happening in cybersecurity marketing? What are the trends that are happening in cybersecurity marketing that are most meaningful or stand out or annoying to you? You can really kind of understand if folks have that personality and can connect with our buyer. I think that, like, the talent, the folks that understand that cybersecurity is still a little bit has a Wild West personality and can market to that, are the folks that I look for. How do you, how do you get in and, identify these threats and vulnerabilities and see things that need to get fixed and want to fix them and have an aptitude for it? Those are kind of the questions that I look for. Like I said before, it's like a super unique personality and discipline. It's not like the world of IT operations. So when I worked in IT operations and I was hiring for folks who were really into infrastructure and IT operations marketing, they had to be very academic, like super academic, and very interested in a highly complex, very technical product and selling that in the enterprise landscape. And so to do that, you had to have like a background in solutions architecture or engineering or product or anything like that. In cybersecurity, that helps, but there also has to be like this renegade personality, I think that exists from a cultural perspective that makes you stand out.
Yeah, that's interesting. It almost seems then that what you're hiring for is somebody that is either like your target customer or understands at least that target customer. And I would imagine that there's probably some variation in personality types and a lot of these intangibles between the different functions within security. So, for instance, somebody in GRC might be extremely detail oriented, and they want to make sure that the marketing is 110% accurate. Whereas somebody in security operations or leading one of those teams might be more interested in the new shiny objects, the technical stuff. So
I think that's really insightful. I worked for a GRC company in the past, and hiring for marketing in GRC is exactly what you're talking about. A focus on technical details and having an auditor's mindset, was very important. Whereas now, in a password manager, for example, it is very much focused on vulnerabilities and threat detection and the biggest threats that are on the horizon. And having almost law enforcement mindset, I think, is very important to kind of understand what our buyer wants to hear.
Boy, that's interesting too. The law enforcement mindset. I used to encounter that mindset a lot. Seeing people go from being LEOs, in the government to digital forensics and bringing their investigative mindset with them. And that was certainly interesting to watch. What do you? How do you typically look for folks? Like, is it an outbound motion? Do you rely on your recruiters? How do you find people?
Yeah, it's a combination. I mean, hiring somebody who you know always reduces the risk versus hiring somebody you don't know. So I am blessed. I've got a great network of folks. I've built some relationships over the years that I tap into. I have also got folks who know a lot of people that I look for recommendations. So I think that typical path is very important. But also, I do try to look for folks who may have been overlooked in some other area, who may not necessarily come from marketing, but who might want to do marketing. Marketing in and of itself too is unique that way, because you might have been able to have worked in product marketing or product or engineering or security and want to come and do marketing. And that's when you're a true gem, because you bring that technical discipline and that rigor into marketing. You don't see that in security operations. You don't see that in threat detection, because you have to build a career there and you have to understand the nuances and the technical qualities of it. So it's very hard to make that leap out of marketing into some other discipline. But I love bringing folks in who just have a desire to tell stories and have the technical rigor and discipline to understand what our buyer wants to hear.
That's so cool. Yeah. I mean, in my experience, 99% of hiring boils down to, and I've said this before, just hiring somebody that's done the exact same job yesterday. And that's what hiring is these days, especially in a very crowded market. How do you determine who has those transferable skills that would actually make them good at marketing when maybe they weren't already in that seat previously?
Yeah. Again, it's marketing also is unique, because I believe it is best when you hire somebody who wants to do something different. And so when somebody is frustrated by the kind of marketing that exists in the world today, if somebody is frustrated by all the stories that are not being told, is there somebody who sees an opportunity that we're not doing at my company, or that the industry is not doing, that is really interesting to me. And so to be able to sharpen the focus on having that conversation, like, what are we not doing? What do we need to be doing? You see, what is a blind spot, that exists in marketing today? That's a really interesting conversation that I like to have.
Yeah, that's super cool. Hiring people that want to solve problems that maybe don't come from your same bubble, but that are going to bring in a fresh perspective. I think so much of hiring, as you had kind of mentioned before, comes down to risk aversion. What, I guess, are the potential upsides and downsides of trying to reduce risk as much as possible versus, take on some risks in hiring somebody when they're not, a proven entity?
Yeah. So I have made a lot of mishires in my life, and I think it is because I have a very low risk aversion. I'm willing to take bets. I'm willing to make gambles on folks who don't have a non-traditional background, but who want to get into storytelling. And I think that's the downside. But the upside is you find amazing people that way. I think it's like that in everything. Success in SaaS is a lot of calculated bets, and some of them work out and some of them don't. And I think that extends to the hiring world as well.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, taking calculated risks and understanding that maybe it won't always work out, but there is a lot of potential upside there. How do you plan for the hires that don't end up working out? If you're taking these risks continuously, it would seem that you would need to have some sort of contingency plan in place to ensure that, somebody doesn't work out, they're not upsetting your team culture or, the way that the department functions.
Yeah. So in every 30, 60, 90 plan that I present to a new hire, there's how are you going to show value? There's a section in the 30, 60, 90 of how you're going to show value. How are you going to show value in week one? Well, it's going to be introducing yourself and meeting the right people. How are you going to show value in the first 30 days? How are you going to show value in the first 90 days? And when you can detail that out, I think it's very clear for the candidate, like this is what needs to happen for me to set the stage and to create a meaningful first impression. So it can be very easy that way to identify like who is the right kind of hire and who is not, because it's clarified. Like how are you going to show value in that first period of time? I try to be realistic in that, like there are stretch goals that show value in the first 30, 60, 90, and then there are unattainable goals. So I'm not asking for anything that I think is unreasonable. But it does require you to hit the ground running, obviously, because we work in these are relatively small businesses where people can make a huge impact.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, especially in startups, you really have to hire for that high potential individual who's quickly adaptable and intelligent and curious and, all these things. But yeah, it's an interesting way of hiring for sure that you're capable of considering, I guess, more non-traditional folks. What about, do you ever hire on the more junior side?
I do. There's a lot of junior roles in corporate marketing, in particular, folks who want to get into writing or PR or content or design. Like these are very junior level roles for sure.
Do you see AI as being a threat to those more junior level roles on the marketing side?
I'm going to give you a controversial answer here in that I don't think AI is a threat. I think that AI is an enabler. I think that AI exists as a tool. So we have had tools like AI. People talk about how disruptive AI is. I don't disagree. But I do think that the world and history in marketing has been beset with disruptive tools that come in the internet. The internet democratized communication. Like we can now communicate with, our buyer on a one-to-one basis, where formerly it was very broadcast driven. Or digital advertising. Digital advertising allowed for hyper-targeting in a way that broadcast media didn't do it in the past. So it completely transformed everything. But all it required workers to do was adapt to the new world. And I think that AI is forcing an adaptation as well. That's not to say I'm not going to hire juniors. I was a copywriter, and I grew up as a copywriter, very early days. And when you have a great copywriter, I can tell you, Pete, it cannot be replaced with AI. And that becomes a differentiator. The other thing that I'm seeing right now is there's a default to move everything to AI. And the problem with that is that every company has access to the same tool. And in marketing, if everybody has access to the same tool, the human, the emotional, the brand becomes the differentiator.
The story.
The story. Why would I outsource the story and the brand to AI when every other company is doing the exact same thing? And so I really do still believe in the junior marketer. I think it is going to be how companies will stand out in the future.
Yeah, well, and each human has their own unique experiences that enables them to tell stories about those experiences. AI doesn't have experiences to expand on and tell a story about. That's not something you can replace as human experience with any sort of tool. But
AI is cheesy. AI, like ask AI to tell you a joke, it'll tell you a cheesy joke. I think we laugh because there's novelty there because wow, AI can tell this amazing joke. But if you look at it, like you really want the best advertising campaigns in history were human built and human driven. And I still really do believe that.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And if, like you said, if everybody's using the same tools, then it's no longer a differentiator. It's not a competitive advantage. Yeah. I mean, I see that on the recruiting side as well. That's why I still do things very manually. I'm choosing exactly who I'm reaching out to on LinkedIn. I'm tailoring my messages. I'm, making those human connections with people because people appreciate it. And, if every message looks the same and people don't feel like you're talking to them specifically, they'll tune out. You really need to cater these messages. And I would imagine for marketing, that's even more important because on the candidate side, you don't have to ask them to part with their money. Whereas if you're selling a product or service, you do. So.
Absolutely. Do you find, let me ask you this. So on the recruiter side, how are you finding AI to be an enabler and how are you finding AI to be disruptive?
Yeah. I don't leverage it as much as a lot of people do, I think. I'll use it to create podcast summaries, for instance, through my editor. I have a calendar link to automate scheduling. I have, I'll use AI sometimes to generate legal document templates, that sort of thing. But it's not something I necessarily use in my actual recruiting day to day, because I still like to tell those stories about what's great about my clients and why a candidate might be interested. I try and address what I think their motivators might be, what their human motivators for making a move might be in my outbound messaging to folks. But I have found it useful for like summarizing meeting notes, that sort of thing, note takers built into Zoom and such. That's really, truly like a time saver and an enabler, I think, just like the calendar link.
Yeah. But basically it's saving you time. It's not replacing like a human in the loop, or it can't truly be a replacement for, human impact.
Yeah, I would say, the real magic in recruiting is having those conversations, getting people excited about this potentially life-changing opportunity that they had never considered before. Maybe they've never heard of this company before, and you're showing them that the grass is in fact greener on this side of the fence. That's not something you can really put in writing in order to get somebody truly excited. I think you really have to have that conversation. And then too, the screening side of it, really understanding when somebody's BSing you and having that emotional intelligence to dig deeper when one of somebody's answers didn't necessarily sound like it was the full truth, that sort of thing.
That's a fantastic use case. I got a LinkedIn request from a recruiter today, as a matter of fact, and it started with "Hi, first name," and then it went into the pitch. And I thought to myself, well, that was probably an AI influenced situation where you didn't even write my name in the email body. Like that is an argument against automation. That if you're really trying to recruit for this role, do you want your recruiter not even thinking about how to engage with a candidate? He's just totally like cutting and pasting a canned email into a LinkedIn.
Well, and that highlights the importance of attention to detail too, because
there you go. Yeah, totally.
Knowing how these tools work. So in LinkedIn Recruiter, there's like you have to use certain types of brackets essentially, and then it'll auto-populate somebody's first name in your templates, but they probably put in the wrong bracket.
Put in the wrong bracket. Totally, yes.
Yeah. So it could have looked customized if they had put in the right bracket, but
there you go. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So I think the key takeaway for me with AI and automation is human in the loop. I've talked a lot about that, especially with my friends in GRC, where there's an argument about how much of an audit can you actually automate. And at what point does an auditor, a human, need to come in and check the results of the AI, assembling evidence or writing reports or analyzing controls or whatever it may be? I guess my question then for a lot of these different roles, whether it be marketing or security or whatever, is, if a lot of these tasks are being essentially outsourced to AI, like, is it a net increase of tasks for humans to do, or is it in reality a net decrease in tasks? Thus, if there's less tasks for humans to do, maybe less jobs, Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, the answer is really complicated because yes, some tasks are going away and other tasks are emerging. Like the amount of editing that we have to do on AI generated content is like creates twice as much work for some people. And for other people, AI and brainstorming or AI generated campaigns, cuts their work in half. I will say that from a high level, I think that AI does. I think that AI is going to create a resurgence in some forms of marketing that have past been overlooked in general. And one of the places that I'm a huge fan of the future of AI is brand, because we've already talked about it. Like brand is the differentiator, investing in the brand, working on the brand, figuring out a way to differentiate and create a new story is something that AI can't do. So there might be a resurgence of roles around brand management and brand creation, or brand generation or concept generation or anything like that, right? Where you can really differentiate from a human perspective. And you can also differentiate to answer engine optimization, right? Like brand is how you're going to be seen in LLM search, for example. Other places, maybe data analysis, marketing analytics, or, traditional, maybe like some aspects of content generation that only need repeated volume, they might be going away. But I still think that I'm very excited about the future of marketing in AI because it just brings back, I think, all the great parts of why people got into marketing at the very beginning, which is the storytelling aspect, the creative aspect, the differentiation aspect. Like these are more important.
For sure. I mean, how do you, I guess, to speak on differentiation with very skeptical buyers, like if you're marketing to CISOs, for instance, you mentioned they sometimes have that renegade mindset and they're highly skeptical. How do you differentiate yourself in a crowded market to that kind of buyer?
Amazing question. So this is why the personality piece is so important to me in looking for candidates, because the amount of content that comes out about research, reports, third-party insights, we can't compete. There's no way for a small company to compete with $100,000 research report that is commissioned by a CrowdStrike, for example, or a $200,000 research report. But where we can compete is the personality piece. Where we can compete is how we actually see the buyer, how we connect with the buyer, and how we make a human connection. And so that's why this personality and the ability to understand personality I think is so important in marketing. I'll give you a great example. So at LastPass, we do a lot of social, and we do a lot of social about some very insightful, pieces of content. We have a threat intelligence team. The threat intelligence team is amazing, and they are always surfacing insights about vulnerabilities, and we post them on social, and it's great. But one of the highest trafficked social media posts we have done this year was making a joke about how the Louvre security system, the password was Louvre to get it like to get into the Louvre security system. And to me, that indicates that all the threat intelligence in the world and all the smart insights and data in the world may not necessarily connect with our buyer at the same level that a really well-timed cybersecurity joke can do. So I want to find those folks who know those jokes, who can tell those jokes in a really meaningful way.
Yeah, that's a great point, and super interesting too, because I have noticed a fair amount of engagement on my weekend posts about what I'm doing in the yard.
Like what you're doing in the yard, yes.
Yeah, I mean, people like to see what somebody's all about and what drives them and what they're interested in. Yeah. I think people like passion.
And how exciting for a candidate in marketing and cybersecurity can that be when you think about the opportunity to bring your whole self and your whole perspective and your whole understanding of our buyer to the workplace. So I want to see more of that. I want to see people who can be really authentic on social. I'm not saying it's easy. I don't do it very well, but I love when candidates can do that. And I pay attention on when I'm looking on social, when I'm looking on LinkedIn, to the folks that are able to be most authentic in those capacities and connect with our buyers, because I want more of that in my organization.
For sure. Well, and I feel like it takes some time to develop what, or to refine, I guess, what your authentic voice for socials is. At least that's been my experience, because there for the longest time, I would my whole goal really was to be as professional as possible and, give all these tangible insights that I knew people would want. But that doesn't always connect with the buyer, to your point from earlier. Like, I think people want to get a sense for your actual personality. So I've gotten a little bit more loose in my approach to social posts. I'll make jokes. I'll use more smileys, these things that, I don't know, at least anecdotally, they seem to be improving my reach.
Yeah, typos are in. Typos are the latest craze because that will improve your reach, no doubt.
Huh. Yeah, I wouldn't have thought that. But yeah, I guess that's further proof that it is human generated. So
exactly. Yeah.
What about
fewer dashes and more typos?
There you go. Well, what about the relationship with sales? I would imagine that factors in a lot to, your daily working and the people that you hire. How important is having the human on the front end of, the sales funnel and interacting with them as a marketer?
Yeah. So, in marketing, we do always say that we exist to make sales successful. We exist to make sales easier. You can do that in many different ways. You can do that on the demand generation front, which is, hey, I'm here to drive leads, quality leads, campaigns. I'm here to work a booth, whatever, and help you get more leads in your pipeline. Or it can exist on the brand level, which is the opposite side of that, which is I'm here to create a meaningful brand, which makes every conversation that you have with your prospects easier and makes them, think about your company in a different light when they're alone in a room. So having, I think, humans that understand the nuance of what that sales conversation is like is more important than ever, particularly because, again, like everybody has access to the same AI tools. Everybody might be evaluating you in the same way by going to an LLM and typing in some piece of advice that they're looking for. But the ability to have humanity in those situations, I think, will differentiate. So I do believe that people, in particular in marketing, who are relatable, who have the ability to say yes and figure things out, have the ability to understand the pain that sales feels all the time, that our buyer feels all the time. The emotional intelligence piece is so critical. There has been a pendulum swing in marketing to look at the data, to pay attention to the data and to find the insights in the data, more so in the past 5 or 10 years than I have ever seen. And the thing about that is I think it's good. But now that we have AI that could mine the insights in the data for you, the pendulum eventually should be swinging back to, okay, what do we do with this and how do we have a more human connection and a human experience with sellers in the field, with buyers in the market, with internal champions in the organization? That's more important than ever.
At what point do, I guess, the data analytics pieces stop and where does that human emotional connection start? What happens if, I guess, what the salespeople on the front end of the process are saying and talking to their prospects, what if that doesn't match with what the analytics are saying? Like, who do you trust?
What a great question. Yeah. If the data is telling you one thing and the humans are telling you another thing, who do you trust, right? Man, what a complicated thing to think about. When you think about buying, buying is both an emotional and logical decision, right? Whether you're buying something very small, which is it's super small, I want to find the best price, all the way up to buying a car or a piece of enterprise software, which is still a relationship transaction, but also has an element of logic in it. I think you have to tease it out in each individual situation. So we're a password manager, right? And in terms of being a password manager, that is both an emotional and logical decision. It is emotional because I care about my security online. I care about all the places I'm going online and how I don't want to have to remember a million different passwords and I want it autofilled. I want ease. I mean, that's an emotional piece of it. But it's also a logical decision, which is I want to make sure that all my passwords are protected. I want to make sure that I have access to best-in-class security, things like passkeys, which are very critical and emerging in passwordless authentication. That has a logical piece to it. And so I think in order to be a well-rounded full stack marketer, you have to acknowledge and have room for both of those aspects of the buying process. And so if somebody from sales tells you, hey, I am hearing a lot about this one particular aspect of LastPass that is getting in the way of a buyer making a decision. And yet you look at the data and it says, oh, that's an isolated incident. That's a special case. We're not seeing that across the board. I think that in order to really make sales easier, you have to engage with that seller and understand like what is going on there and why are they feeling that pain or why can't they overcome that. You can't answer every individual query from a salesperson. At some point, you have to look at the data and make decisions. But I think that we would be remiss if we didn't remember that our job is to make sales easier. And if there's one particular seller whose life is really hard because we're not acknowledging the human capacity for emotion, then we're failing that seller.
Yeah, well, it kind of makes me think of like Glassdoor reviews where I'm a big fan of looking for trends. Maybe if you have your whole sales team and they're all kind of reporting the same common thread in talking to buyers one-on-one, having those emotional connections, maybe that's something. But if it's, a one-off scenario. So I guess what I was saying is when it comes to the reviews, you're looking for through lines. You're looking for the same repeated phrases in those reviews that come up time and time again. Like if you see toxic management 15 times in 5 reviews, that's probably, yeah, exactly.
Like my response when folks ask me this question of like, what is the truth? If I'm seeing something in real life versus seeing something in the data, what is the truth? And my answer is always lives somewhere in between. It lives somewhere in the middle. The truth always lives somewhere in the middle. And it's our job to figure out like where in the middle it does live. Because the data isn't always right. The humans aren't always right. That's my personal belief. I think it's a hot take because I think when you talk to most marketing folks and they will tell you that the answer lives in the data. It always goes back to the data. And maybe I'm lighting myself on fire here by saying this, but I believe that the answer lives somewhere in between the human experience and the data.
Yeah. Well, and I kind of see that in recruiting too. It's like I spend a lot of time on these manual processes and talking to people, but I also try to provide my clients with as much data as I can. Problem is, for recruiting, it's so hard to get good data. Even salary information, you look on Glassdoor or salary.com or whatever, those numbers are never, ever representative of the actual numbers that people are asking for in the screening calls. And in the screening calls, I dig down into, okay, what's your, what are you really looking for salary wise, OTE wise, if they're a salesperson, what benefits do you have currently? What are you looking for? And I get very granular on that. And often I'll present market data from the people that I talk to. I'll say, look, they're currently at 130. They're not going to make a move for less than 130. I know your analysts are saying it's 100K, but that's not the reality on the ground. It's.
Yeah, because it is still a business of humans. And what is concerning to me about the way that I see the market going and the way that I see my network posting on LinkedIn is that gradually the humanity of all of our interactions is going away. That we think that AI is a great example of this. AI can replace the humanity of our interactions. But at the end of the day, like we're all just human beings, like trying to sell things to each other, trying to buy stuff, trying to have transactions, trying to build companies, trying to do things. And if the eventual like end game of all of this is one AI bot, agent talking to another AI agent to transact on something for an AI company, like to me, that's not what the human pursuit is all about, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I think people find meaning in work. It sounds kind of dystopian to me because I often talk about this on the hiring and recruiting side. It's like we have all these people customizing resumes using AI, customizing, quote unquote. They all end up looking the same. And then they're filtered by an applicant tracking system that ranks based on keywords of all of these auto-generated resumes. So essentially it is that. It's two systems talking to each other. where I think there should always be a human in the loop. It's starting to move away from that. Latest example, I actually did find finally an ATS that does auto reject people based on keywords. It'll actually send automated invites to interviews and conduct an AI-led interview via a chat function, which is absolutely crazy to me, with zero human in the loop. So all the recruiter has to do is set basically a relevance threshold for their resume. So if it doesn't match, say, 70% of the keywords needed, they'll get that auto rejection email. But what's interesting is the email is actually customized by AI to say why they weren't selected. Oh, your resume was missing this piece. I think for a lot of people, that would be actually an improvement over hearing nothing at all.
I guess it's true. Yeah, that's probably true.
But I think a lot of people don't like the idea of having their first round interview with a chatbot either. So
I would think so too. I think that's a great example. I think at the end of the day, if you really zoom out at the whole world, what's funny to me is that you have founders who work gives their life so much meaning, so much humanity is work, and at the same time, they're thinking about how to remove all the humanity from the work that they are doing with AI. And there's these two diametric oppositions to like what we believe work ought to be. It ought to be profitable. It ought to be efficient. It ought to be all these great things that machines can provide us for sure. But we started work to give our lives meaning, to have humanity. And so why are we taking that away now?
Yeah. Well, so I guess the key takeaway for me is just always have a human in the loop. It's good for the people. It's good to keep the systems in check. And that human interaction piece is always going to be so important. So
100%.
Absolutely. Any other thoughts on hiring? Like, how do you generally find your relationships with internal, external recruiters and that? How does that go for you typically?
Yeah. So great question. Recruiters. I find that here's what I know. When I approach recruiters with this intellectual understanding of what they're trying to get out of our relationship, I think it's way more positive. I acknowledge that I know that recruiters are looking for they're looking to satisfy the buyer with a great candidate. They're looking to fill this role because that's how they get paid. And they also they want to do a great job. And I think if you kind of understand that about them, you have a better overall relationship. I do like working with external recruiters. I find them to be really smart, and oftentimes I'm surprised at how well they know the business, how well they know my business, how well they know the industry. And the best recruiters really go the extra mile and take the time to kind of understand that. So overall, I have great positive experiences with recruiters.
That's great to hear. Yeah, I mean, I certainly think there's a night and day difference between a really, really good recruiter and an average recruiter, even, not to mention a poor recruiter. And I think for the longest time, our profession has gotten a bad rep because the barrier to entry was just too low. And I guess I was in that position at some point where I didn't have any experience. I just had a degree and I came in fresh, didn't know anything about IT. They put me through 2-week training class and I just kind of had to figure it out. And I think some people are more capable of understanding technical concepts, but not everybody's built that way. That's what I discovered in working for a large staffing firm is some people would really start to excel very quickly and other people would just struggle to understand the terminology and the relationships between terms and all the acronyms. It kind of makes me wonder, like, what's that X factor that makes a recruiter truly good at what they do, especially in technical recruiting where it can be extra challenging over, say, customer service jobs.
If you had to bias between technical understanding and human understanding, what would you think is more important?
That's a good question. For technical roles, I think being able to understand the technical terms is important. But then, boy, I would say it's about 50-50 because you have to have the emotional intelligence to understand when somebody's not telling you the whole truth. And not everybody's built that way. Not everybody's an empath. I'm a big, super interested in psychology because I think human psychology basically doesn't change regardless of how advanced our civilization becomes and how many AI tools we have. At the end of the day, like you were saying earlier, everybody still has the same kind of motivators. They want to be loved. They want to be feel fulfilled. They want to make money and provide for their family. None of this stuff changes as the technology does. So I think it helps to understand humans, but for technical recruiting, boy, you really need to be able to understand the terms to be able to screen people properly. And not everybody is cut out to do that. And to find somebody that has both of those things, I think in recruiters is super rare. And that's why the good recruiters make really good money, is because they're exceptional at what they do. And there's not a lot of those people out there. It's, it's what's the Pareto principle? So 20% of the top people produce 80% of the results, something like that.
Totally. Yeah. It's a great answer.
Yeah. What about marketers? Do you feel that the technical understanding is more important than the human understanding, or vice versa?
It's a good question. So I do believe that the technical aspect of marketing can be taught and the human aspect cannot be taught. But what that means is that if you come to a job and you have the human aspect nailed, but you don't have the technical aspect, a great human is going to get up to speed fast. And so if you have the attitude, you can make up for a lot of not having the aptitude, more or less. I think that's unique to marketing. I don't think that exists in GRC or security operations. But marketing, we are blessed because we can hire great humans and they can get up to speed fast.
Well, yeah. And I think so much of effective hiring boils down to hiring for future potential and understanding the intangibles that make somebody a good employee over the long term. And for me, it's like curiosity, just genuine intelligence. Like IQ is such a big predictor of success in any given role. Positive attitude, internal locus of control. Yeah.
Scrappiness, desire, problem solving, human attributes.
Yeah, which is so funny because 99% of job descriptions are all technical in nature. They're looking for very tangible skills and not a lot of these intangibles. But that's not something you can always pick up on, I guess, in a resume. So I guess that's why we default to putting the technical, tangible terms in the job descriptions and not the intangibles, which I think we need to suss out in these conversations. So
isn't that funny? That's really funny. I think that's very insightful.
Absolutely. Well, we're coming up on time, Jordan. So just one last question for you. Is there anything we're not talking about in the industry, but we should be, especially as it relates to hiring?
That is a great question. I think that hiring, the biggest aspect of hiring that's probably the most important to me that we didn't really talk about very much, and I'm going to go human again because I have a human-centric, like a human-first mindset, is having empathy for people on both sides. So I think it's very important for, obviously, the hiring team to have empathy for candidates, like to have empathy for everybody out there looking for a job, looking for a better life or a better situation or whatever. Everybody has their story. It's important to be empathic about that. I also think it's very important for, the candidates to have empathy for, and this hot take, the hiring team, because we have goals that we're trying to meet too. And I wish I could give a job to everybody out there who wanted a job. How amazing would that be? But we can't. We have to make decisions. We have to make hard choices. We can obviously be better to candidates at every step of the way. And I want to be as good to candidates as I possibly can. And I hope the candidates have that level of empathy for, where we're coming from as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, it definitely goes both ways. And I think professionalism too. So much of, I guess, recruiting efforts nowadays boil down to volume and just sorting through all of the volume. But I think often that human connection, that human touch is lost, and people aren't being viewed as humans. They're being viewed as numbers, basically. And I think people remember when they're treated as a human, whether they're a candidate or a hiring manager. That stands out in somebody's memory. And that's the kind of way, I think, to build brand equity and employer brand equity over time, is to create those memorable experiences that, people never forget. So
we're all trying to do the best we can with what we have.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for your time, Jordan. If people want to reach out to you, what's the best way to do so?
They can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd love to hear from them. Look me up at VP Marketing at LastPass. I think that's probably the best way.
Sounds good. Well, thanks for your time, Jordan. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Bean.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Talent Gap Fireside Chat. Don't forget to follow our page on LinkedIn and like and subscribe on Spotify and YouTube. Hit that notification bell to be notified when we drop a new episode. New episodes air every Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern.